Hello and welcome to the stream. We're up and running, going for another philosophy roulette. Looks like 269. Nice. Yeah. Another exciting day in the New York City metro area. There was a bunch of police activity where I work. It was not related to the mass shooter that was apprehended, who apparently is probably as far as I can tell, they wanted to get themselves arrested. It looks like they called it in themselves. They said, "Hey, it looks like you guys want to arrest me." That's kind of amazing, but this is how these things go. So that was exciting, but there was a lot of police activity in my area. I guess I can't really describe it in case it is on the news. I would dox myself, but yeah, a whole bunch of cops showed up very quickly. Not even, there are cops where I am. Dude, there was a substation near me, and then a whole bunch more cops showed up. So that was interesting. And then hey, Noger Zero went live. There went my alarm. There goes the Discord notification. Good for you, Discord. That was only 5 minutes in, or 6 minutes in. So I hope everyone out there is doing okay. I also won an eBay auction. And it's amazing because I haven't actually bought anything via auction off eBay in a decade. I've just bought stuff buy it now or whatever. But I won an eBay auction for a drawing tablet that, a digital drawing tablet that you plug into the computer, and then so instead of just pencil on paper, it'll show up on screen, so that way I can maybe do better annotations on screen, which I kind of like the idea of, because last time I had I tried something out very, very quickly, and I actually thought it worked out well. And drawing tablets ain't cheap. These are things people like, and they're nice pieces of tech, so you don't get them for cheap. But this was open box, and the one I got is this Huion 610 V2 Pro, and apparently it's the best one you can get for this amount of money, and I got it for $15 or something, $14.50, that's including shipping. So super happy about getting to try it out for very low barrier to entry here, so that's cool. Scheduling with complete multi-part and compatible graph on parallel machines, complexity and algorithms. I'm sure that would make a wonderful read, just not for stream. Clinical ethics, criminal law, and philosophy. As always, if someone has a something they want me to go into, it's cool. We got Tao, a journal of comparative philosophy. This is always fun to read something from a non, U.S. or European-centered perspective. Not in the Greek tradition, but something else. So, let's see. Is there anything, Oh boy, okay, there's a bunch of things. There's a survey on Chinese classical political philosophy. That's fun. On becoming a rooster, Zhuangzian, conventionalism, and the survival of death. Well, that sounds exciting. The Zhuangzi depicts persons as surviving their death through the natural transformations of the world into very different forms, such as roosters, cartwheels, rat livers, and so on. It is common to interpret these passages metaphorically. In this essay, however, I suggest employing conventionalist view of persons that says whether a person survives some event is not merely determined by the world, but is partly determined by our own attitudes. No idea what that is. Well, you can click on it and see if it's available. It is available. Ooh, so we could go do something about surviving death. There's a survey on classical Chinese philosophy. I wonder if this is open access, this journal. Because there was a new, what's it called? No, this is Springer. I don't know. This buy article. Nope, not open access. It's published by Springer. That's fine. This is a review. Alright, so we got, maybe this is kind of long. It's longer than I normally want to read. But the simple fact is that it's, 32 pages, but double spaced. That might, be not so bad. I mean, yeah, I don't really like going 32 pages. It gets exhausting. Let's see what dialogue is. It looks like French. Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't read French, so that's sad.
In your position, I would say yes.
So, see what else is available. You know, what's been fun recently is we got to talk about hunger. We got to talk about silence. I like these sorts of topics because I like phenomenology. We get to talk about phenomenology, and B, these are experiences everyone gets to participate in. If I want to talk about Zhuangzian conventionalism and the survival of death, everyone can talk about death and like afterlife, survival of death, but Zhuangzian conventionalism is not going to be something most of the viewers here have considered before. Whereas talking about like the structure of hunger, you might have thought about like what's it like to be hungry. Frontiers in human neuroscience, frontiers in these frontiers. I like these, but these are very scientific. These are tend to be a longitudinal study. These are studies that get written by people that have philosophical interest, but they're not they're more science than philosophy themselves. So, a neglected argument for the reality of God. Is this available? No. Let's see if I can get a hold of this, because it's kind of fun. PDF in Espanol. Is that €5? Huh. Interesting. Language English, yes. So we're PDF. What does this mean? No. Is it not here? Huh, I don't understand this website. Oh well, can't read it if it's unavailable. Intergenerational Justice Review, interesting. International Journal of Applied Philosophy. Huh. Let's click on it, see what if it has something to say. Studies in the Philosophy of Science. Pseudoscience as a negative outcome of scientific dialogue. A pragmatic, naturalistic approach to the demarcation problem. Let's click on that. This is like 9 pages. Moral grounds for forgiveness. Interesting. That's always a good type. Oh, they must have there's a second one on forgiveness. When should military get involved in politics? Commonly most days. When should the military get involved in politics? Forgiveness and unconditionality. Pain, suffering, and euthanasia in insects. Wow. Alright, I kind of want to see that. Is it available? Oh, come on, not available. Please be available. I want to know what that is. That's annoying. Let me just read the abstract because it's fun. While unnecessarily killing or injuring an insect is arguably wrong, euthanasia of an accidentally injured insect raises a new issue of whether insects can experience pain. The question takes renewed significance due to increasing insect farming for food and feed concerns over farmed insect welfare. For euthanasia of a damaged insect to be justifiable, the damage must be sensed as a noxious stimulus that the insect consciously experiences as pain. This pain must then lead to suffering or frustrated desire. Oh, dagnabbit, I wish I could read about, like, insect desire. That would be so much fun. I mean, these are. Let's see. Let's try moral groundness for forgiveness. Viewbot Prime, welcome back. How are you? I could read about. Hello, hello. We could read about, moral grounds for forgiveness. This is not like a terrible topic. It's a good topic. So, let's see. Viewbot, do you have a? Yeah, I know. I do have the audio playing in the background. This is the normal audio I have playing, but it has a muffled track actually as part of it. So this will go away in a second. I'm sorry about that. I'll put it down, but like, it'll stop playing. It's just part of the music I have. Yeah, it's going away right now. Yeah. Huh. Do you have any ideas on what to read? I have a paper on, more like forgiveness. This is I'm looking at some philosophy of science papers. So, because it's been a funky few days in New York. Last few days, we had a mass shooting. They got the guy today. I mean, he turned himself in. Myself, I mean, like I said earlier, we've got some. There was a lot of police activity right near where I was working for unrelated reasons. I mean, that's not going to be I'm not in Brooklyn, actually. No, I'm not, I don't want to say where I am, but I'm not in Brooklyn. Like, I'm not over there. So, yeah. I mean, I'm generally... Yeah. Well, I'll just say I'm not in Brooklyn. So, but yeah, my cousin lives out there. He was pretty close to it, where he lives. So, yeah. It was a very bad mess. Very bad mess. And, I mean, everyone's patting themselves on the backs for getting the guy. I mean, the guy was in the Lower East Side. If you're in the Lower East Side, you're not hiding, which I find kind of, that means he's, you don't go to the Lower East Side of Manhattan to hide. Someone spotted him on the street, like they called it in, and then he apparently called it in like a few minutes later, and he was sitting in the McDonald's. I saw the McDonald's there. Anyone who's been to the Lower East Side a bit knows this McDonald's. What is it, on like 6th or something, or 5th? Like, it's a giant, the guy is probably completely nuts. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get a few of them just by the sheer number of people that are here. But, it's, yeah. PDF. I got it. Oh, look at that. Do they have access? So this is open access. It's, no, I'm not gonna read this. It's just too long. I don't think I don't quite think he understood what he was up to. Yeah, it's like he's really a confused person. I think he was saying, like, he was posting, like, basically racist diatribes online, and it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, just no. So, alright, so I'm still looking at this forgiveness paper. That might be the easiest thing I found to do at the moment. Journal of Aesthetics and Art Criticism. Well, I haven't done aesthetics in a while. The morality of party switching. Well, I like parties. Who doesn't like parties? But yeah, apparently he was like posting just crazy things on, YouTube. So it's 15 pages. Nah, I don't want to read this much. Yeah. Well, we could. It depends if anyone has a choice out there. So I'm just taking a look. What else we got? It's just been weird times here in New York. People are. My boss was saying basically, we're starting to. He says it's starting to feel more like Gotham City, like sort of the noir Batman type stuff where you've got like people donning face masks and like shooting up stuff. Like you got the Joker running around. So, What journal am I in? Journal of Bioethics. Okay. So I don't know. It's like, to tell you the truth, for me, I don't think this is really out of the ordinary. I mean, we just had. It's just not like that crazy. Like to be have a shooting in New York. It's just not happened for a while. Everything was so quiet that it's like one shooting is like we're gonna lose our minds. It's like fair. We should lose our minds a little bit for shootings, but like, this is not that shocking either. Everything's long. Hey, I know these people. Let's see. Conventions and status functions. We argue that there is a variety of convention effective coordinating agreement that has not been adequately identified in the literature. Its distinctive feature is that it is a structure of conditional. We intentions of parties, unlike more familiar varieties of convention, which are structures of expectations and preferences or obligations. We argue that status functions, that is, social functions like being a pawn, a present, or a dollar bill, constitutively involve this variety of convention, and that what is special about it explains and gives precise content to the central feature of status functions, namely that objects with status functions can perform their functions only insofar as they've been collectively accepted as having them. Okay, so basically, I guess basically, this is saying that, look, to have status is a social thing, and then there's an intentional component to that. So status functions are like intentional, like that it gives a structure to the group that is the object. I'm going to hold on to this. Maybe I'll go hassle the people because I actually know Maria. A New Hope. Nope. So nothing in the Journal of Philosophy. So we're going to read this paper on the morality of party switching because that's basically it. Would I be interested in covering some classic papers like Quine, Davidson, that type of stuff? I'm not against it. To tell you the truth, no, party switching? No. Actually, no, let's not do the party. I'm sorry, I didn't want to do the party switching. I want to do this moral grounds for forgiveness because the party switching is kind of long. It's 15 pages. And this one is, no, it's 14 pages. I don't know. What do you want to do? Party switching or do you want to do moral grounds for forgiveness? Because they're basically the same length. We've got one more page, forgiveness. Okay, so let's do that. So that is this one here. Let's throw it in. Update. So there's link, and everyone, if you're regular here, it'll show up if you type paper, and it'll be later in the description under the YouTube video. So and we're off. There we go. Yeah, and I got my little box here to scribble in. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I can scribble in box to like write stuff. So, but I'm going to hide it for now because I don't have anything to say yet. Moral grounds for forgiveness. So, awesome. Forgiveness as conditional. Interesting. What was I just saying? I was saying something else. I forgot already. Oh, the classic stuff. Yeah, let me cover that real fast. I'm not against it. I'll be like a lot of classic stuff. I've read some of it. I haven't read all of it, of course. But of course, it's weird when you do the classic stuff because there's so much literature and there's like so many normal ways of taking it, like the conventional understanding of things, that like I'm gonna just make like an ass of myself because I don't actually mind making an ass of myself. I do that all the time with like this stuff I don't quite know about. But it's like with the literature, you're supposed to have like an understanding. I might not. I know some things, not other things. But I'm really not against it. It's just if you want me to read something, then yeah, I'll take a look at it. Again, I have a word limit because it's really hard to go for a long paper in this like sort of format. I lose my voice after 2 hours, or if it takes over 3 hours, it just gets hard. So that's all. And breaking it up, it's like, you know, it's hard enough to get someone to concentrate and listen to me for more than a few minutes. And so if like you're in the weeds in one of these like complicated papers it might be classic, but the idea is like it's like no one's going to be able to just jump into these like big papers that like people think are important without understanding what's going on. So not that's really stopped me before, because I do that with like any old paper anyway, but it's just it's just something to keep in mind. Well, I mean, I'd be happy to do it. And I make no claim to correctness. I never do. I mean, I can't even make claim to like saying words right usually. But yeah, it's like if you have something you want to request, like feel free to request it. I mean, I reserve to say no, but like I'm happy to take a look. And if it works, it works. I've done other stuff. Like I tried getting through some Nietzsche because he had like those aphorisms. I was considering, because like then you could read an aphorism, discuss. I also did Kafka. Kafka has a book of aphorisms. That was kind of fun. I was considering doing the Tractatus. It's been like 100 years since the Tractatus, or like 101 now. So I was considering doing the Tractatus as well. So these are things I was considering, like, because if I'm gonna do historical stuff, it's slightly different, but like it's really not that far from what I'm doing anyway. Okay, so yeah, give it a thought, and if you want something, just let me know. Send me a message. Alright, so now we're reading this Moral Grounds for Forgiveness by Derek R. Brookes, and I apologize for how I say even American-sounding names, or English-sounding names. Go America. So, Tractatus would also be interesting. I never really digested that one. Like most, I prefer the investigations, which I think I know reasonably well. Yeah, I know my I make a small claim to being a Wittgensteinian, so I know something about both the Tractatus and the investigations. Yeah. So I could do the Tractatus, or I could do like passages, like a set of passages from the investigations. Of course, investigations is like this thick. So, but yeah. Tractatus is still thick, but like you can skip a bunch if you really want to. You don't have to go through all the the smallest bullet points. Okay, but we're going to talk about forgiveness as conditional now. Forgiveness is a response to a situation in which our moral equality has not been recognized or acknowledged. But what is moral equality? It cannot mean that we are equivalent with respect to our moral behavior or character. No one is equal in that sense. Rather, we are moral equals insofar as we have the same inherent worth or intrinsic value as human beings. Yeah, so this is like the dignity argument. Like we all have dignity as human beings, and no one can take your dignity away. Of course, you can screw up your own dignity. This kind of worth cannot by definition be removed, diminished, or increased, no matter what we do or what is done to us. Well, that's the thing. People feel like you can debase yourself and then you might not have as much worth, but I guess people also feel like there's a baseline to a human life. But like this is actually a little bit contentious. Like, could you debase yourself? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can. And could you debase yourself in a way that completely ruins you? Like, can you be damned? Can you, in not a religious sense, but like could you damn yourself to like not having any rights? I don't know, but like people sort of think that there's a limit to that, how bad you can fall. And but we still regard you as human. I mean, there's moral monsters out there, and maybe they don't deserve it. I don't know. But that's not what this paper's on. It looks on like the normal person has some level of dignity that needs to be recognized. While our moral equality is universal and impregnable, it can nevertheless be unrecognized, ignored, denied, or challenged. A useful term for capturing this range of attitudes and behaviors is contempt. Conversely, when we show respect for someone, we are acknowledging, honoring, or upholding their moral equality as a fellow human being. Likewise, when we speak of self-respect, self-worth, or dignity in this context, we are referring to the way in which we recognize and uphold our own moral equality. Yeah. And this is where I've seen it before, is people referring to dignity. How do we show contempt for someone? Suppose that I do something that causes you harm, deliberately or at least negligently. However, I do not have adequate justification for my actions, such as I would if I had acted in self-defense. This may cause you physical or material harm, but it is also a moral wound. A flooded home, a crushed limb, or even the death of a loved one can take place without anyone having been wronged. They could have occurred due to a genuine accident or an unforeseen natural disaster. What makes an action morally wrong, then, is not so much the surface outcome, but rather the underlying or implicit message that it conveys. If we steal from someone or lie to them or betray them, we are effectively communicating something about how we see them. We are saying, you are inferior to me, I can use you for my purposes, you are an object, not a human being, and so on. It is on account of these implicit messages that such actions fail to recognize or honor our moral equality. Okay, and so this is like clearly a Kantian sort of take here, because I can use you for my purposes is like literally just like against what Kant would say about this. You can't use other moral agents for your purposes because that's like just exactly opposite, contradicting Kant. So this is not merely an abstract philosophical challenge. We are social creatures, and so we instinctively see ourselves through the eyes of those around us. Okay, so now we're going sociological. Interesting. So this is see ourselves through the eyes of those around us. And as we were talking about in Aristotle's stream a few days ago, talking about W.E.B. Du Bois, this is a sociological analysis now. When our, because how you see how people are seen is like a social thing. When our self-respect is threatened in this way, we will almost invariably experience shame or humiliation. These are the most excruciating emotions it is possible for us to have. I don't know about that, but okay. Moreover, the threat to our moral equality can be a matter of life or death. Someone who is not regarded as a moral equal is far more likely to be subjected to the horrors of genocide, murder, slavery, sexual abuse, racism, and so on. That is why being treated with contempt feels threatening in a way that is not dissimilar to suffering physical violence. I guess so. I mean, if someone like makes you feel like you are below them in some way, it feels crappy. I don't know if it's like the worst thing possible, but maybe it's up there as like terrible experiences, emotional experiences. I don't know if I've ever felt like extreme contempt. I've felt contempt before. I don't know about extreme contempt. Our moral equality thus creates the expectation that others will respect us as we will respect them. When two or more people are meeting this expectation in how they treat each other, then we might say that they are maintaining their moral relations. When someone treats another person with contempt, they have thereby broken or ruptured these relations, and so we can call this a moral breach. You know, I'm not so sure at the moment. I have sort of a, love-hate relationship with other people. I treat everyone, I try to treat them okay. That doesn't mean I actually think they're any, like some people I don't think are any good at all. I try to treat basically people in a good way because it basically, that's how I get by. Like if you can't treat people with contempt and expect to get by, it's not going to work. But do I actually care about certain people? No, I don't. Like some people don't deserve respect and like don't need to be treated well. But the fact that they are crappy people doesn't affect how I have to act in terms of the world. I would think less of myself if I was treating everyone crappy just because some people are, of course, that other people don't deserve that. But like this is like individual people. I think they are crappy, not like groups of people, because that would just be racist or whatever. But like not everyone deserves moral respect, and I don't feel like I'm doing a moral breach because they suck. It's not up to me. It's not my fault they suck. They just suck. But that's okay. So I'm mostly on board with what this person's saying as a baseline, but it feels like there's some wrinkles here, or maybe I'm just not up to this person's moral high standards either. And I'm okay with that. Like, I understand, like, there's certain people that have, like, died that are, like, famous. And I was like, I hope they suffered to their last breath. And, I do. So, whatever. I think they deserve it. Okay, continuing. Resentment. When we have been wronged, there are two very different responses we can make. First, we can go on the offensive. This strategy can manifest itself in feelings of hatred, vindictiveness, vengefulness, and in acts of, or at least plans for, revenge. Why would this approach work for us? When we respond in hatred toward the person responsible, we are not merely reasserting our own moral equality. Instead, we are denying the equality of the person responsible. We are not wanting the scales of worth to be rebalanced, we are wanting to tip them in our favor. But how does this eliminate the threat to our self-respect? If the person responsible doesn't count, then neither does their threat. When an ant bites us, we do not feel disrespected. Likewise, if those who harm us are less than fully human, if they're mere monsters, animals, evil, vermin, deranged, or filth, then their opinion of our worth is not something we need to take seriously. Viewbot Prime says, I think the problem is that not every moral wrong involves a violation of moral equality in the strong sense of viewing the aggrieved party as subhuman or not part of the Kantian realm of ends, as they say. Yeah, I'm getting the sense that this paper has a sort of what they're talking about is the narrow sense when like there is a bad moral wrong and like the sort of wrong that would want to call someone a monster for doing to you. So I mean that's fine. If this is what this paper wants to talk about, that's cool. It's just there's other stuff out there, but that's not the focus of this paper. So we just got to figure out what this paper is about, really, because it's called the moral grounds for forgiveness, but you have to forgive. Apparently, they're talking about really bad things that you're gonna forgive. So that's just what they want to talk about. Okay. We do not need to go on the offensive, however. There's an alternative which we might call a defensive response. This involves thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that serve as a buttress against the message of contempt. The chief defensive emotion is resentment, otherwise known as indignation, righteous anger, and the like. But this emotion must be carefully distinguished from hatred or vindictiveness. Resentment falls into a radically different moral category. Unlike hatred, it does not affirm my humanity by denigrating yours. Instead, it enables me to resist your message of contempt by placing a protective shield around my own self-respect without needing to challenge or threaten yours. There's a lot to be said about this, actually, because, one of the things that's been said recently is that indignation is a very cheap emotion. Like, anyone can be indignant nowadays. It's like one of these very common things. I'm angry about this. I'm indignant about like something some politician said. How dare they? That's basically making yourself feel better about it, and it's not I don't know what really good it's doing other than making yourself feel better. So like the author says, it's placing a protective shield around my own self-respect without needing to challenge or threaten yours. The opposite side of this is that without actually having to reconsider whether I deserve like whether my opinions really are worth protecting. And so that's the problem with indignation and righteous anger, is that you can always deploy them. Like it's a little too easy sometimes. We don't know if that's where we're going, but yeah. The moral relevance of reactive attitudes is not completely clear. No, not clear at all. But maybe this author has something to say about it. That might be what's interesting here. There are many reasons to think that this approach is more effective, less damaging, and far more laudable than the offensive strategy, but it has its limitations. A defensive response cannot eliminate the threat that is posed by the person responsible. It only puts up a protective barrier. As long as the person responsible stands by their original message, the person harmed will need to continue defending themselves against it. Each time they remember the wrongdoing, their defensive thoughts and emotions will need to reassert themselves in order to preserve their self-respect. That's fair, because it's like you, by trying to like protect yourself, you're putting up a wall, but walls need to be defended always. So it seems like it's maybe too passive. Apology. All right, so what do we say about this? I'm not even sure what's going on in this paper yet. Suppose a person harmed has taken the defensive strategy. It can be exhausting and debilitating to maintain such a stance, and yet their self-respect is at stake. So what are their options? They could give in to the threat and accept that they are inferior to the person responsible. This strategy is not uncommon as one might think, but the cost of doing so is extremely high. It can result in debilitating false guilt, self-harming behavior, and being re-victimized. There is, however, one situation that will enable them to withdraw their defensive response in a way that will preserve their self-respect. That situation, however, is not entirely up to the person harmed. It requires a change of heart within the person responsible. To explain, if I have committed a wrong against you, I cannot undo the past. What I have done cannot be undone. But what I can do is to renounce the contempt that my action conveyed. I can tell you that I no longer stand by this message. I do not now hold you in contempt, but fully respect your moral equality as a fellow human being. I can say that I regret ever having made it, and that I am ashamed of the person who I was when I communicated it. I can let you know that I am no longer that person, and if appropriate, I will do my best to repair or compensate for any physical or material harm I have caused you. I can also promise not to engage in such behavior again, so far as that is within my power. All right, let's get to the end of this paragraph, this thing, and then we can talk about, really, is that the case? Like, false apologies happen a lot. These are precisely the kind of messages that are conveyed when someone offers a sincere expression of remorse and a genuine apology. It is easy to see the effect that this could have on a person harmed. When a person responsible disavows their message of contempt in this way, then if the person harmed is convinced that they are sincere, they will no longer feel that their self-respect is under threat. The moral breach has been repaired. The shame and humiliation they were feeling no longer has a sustaining cause. As a consequence, they are likely to experience a surge of relief and a restored sense of safety. Since they do not need to continue protecting themselves, their resentment toward the wrongdoer will naturally fall away. I'm not so sure that this little story is exactly what happens. Because, all right, let's go back to the wall thing, the metaphor. So let's call someone treating you with contempt kind of like they're putting you to siege. You have to defend your walls against this person that is like actively treating you with contempt. The fact that they apologize and retreat does not undo the damage of like the siege that you were in. You have to do that for yourself. You have to get yourself out of this. And so the resentment towards the wrongdoer will naturally fall away. And maybe what's going to happen here is you're going to have to forgive the person, because like you'll not forgive the person. You somehow have to do some more work for yourself to get yourself off the wall. Because like once you're in like this sort of battle stance, you do not just walk away from war. That's not how like psychology works. And so it's like, yeah, this is a necessary condition for getting your sort of like confidence back. If you sort of are just like always defending, and you have to always do that. But like, well, not confidence, but there's like that. But to get away from this is not that it's more complicated than just the resentment towards the wrongdoer will naturally fall away. There is more to getting better than just letting someone step back from their contempt. Forgiveness. This brings up to the nature of forgiveness. Here it is crucial that we make a distinction between the experience of forgiveness and the offer of forgiveness. I will take each in turn. We experience forgiveness when the threat to our self-respect has been withdrawn by the person responsible. Yeah, because this is only a threat, but that doesn't mean this is everything. Threat to threat. And has been withdrawn by the person responsible, and the resentment that was providing us with protection subsides as a consequence. In other words, the experience of forgiveness is not something we can just decide to undergo. It is an emotional response to a changed set of circumstances. Yeah, let's see what footnote 7 is. Okay, the wrongdoer's response was the single largest predictor of forgiveness. Okay, yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, the person doing the wrong thing has to, like, be part of this, but still. Okay, we cannot stop ourselves from feeling resentment by sheer effort or willpower. Being emotionally susceptible to the contempt shown toward us by others is part of what makes us human. We cannot eradicate this feature without doing serious damage to ourselves. Unless we are psychopaths, we will always be vulnerable to the person who has wronged us. It is in this sense that those who refuse to apologize for their wrongs against us continue to harm us. The memory of what they did is likely to resurface from time to time, and when it does, we will almost invariably find ourselves experiencing varying degrees of resentment or indignation. See, this is the thing. Right here. The memory does not leave us. And that is more complicated than just them apologizing. Okay. Nor is this a morally questionable response. If someone failed to experience resentment or indignation at or around the time of the offense, we would have good reason to suspect that they lacked self-respect. But why should the passage of time make a difference? If the messages of contempt conveyed in the original act have not been withdrawn by the wrongdoer, then they remain. Indeed, the failure of the person responsible to admit their fault and denounce what they have done only compounds and amplifies the original disrespect. Those who have been harmed will have even more reason to maintain their defensive emotions against the threat posed by the wrongdoer. It is therefore a mistake to censure or pathologize those who continue to experience resentment in cases where the person responsible has not yet apologized. Now I know what's going on. This is a turn. This is why I just got myself a drawing pad, the other cheek paper. This is saying we have to turn the other cheek. We have to forgive them. I'm not so sure this is a good idea. Oh, there we go. Turn the other cheek. I didn't have it up. But like, I'm not so sure this is a very good idea to turn the other cheek, but this is what this paper looks like it's saying. Here's how to do it. The offer of forgiveness, by contrast, is a communicative act. What would we be attempting to convey by making such an offer to a person who has harmed us? It is not simply a matter of reporting to them that we no longer feel resentment toward them. That emotional change could, after all, be accomplished by condoning their message of contempt, or by denying their moral standing, or by taking medication. None of these involve forgiveness. Thus, an offer of forgiveness must align with what it was that brought about our experience of forgiveness. It must explain, in effect, that the reason we no longer feel resentment toward them is due to the fact that they have, in offering a sincere apology, renounced the message of contempt conveyed by their wrongdoing. It is as a consequence of this that we no longer hold the wrongdoing against them. So far as we are concerned, the moral breach has been repaired and our moral relations have now been restored. You know, again, what is it that makes someone say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wronged you"? Like a sincere apology. Saying a sincere apology, like, I don't know, like, how sincere just saying anything is. You have to be able to back that up with, like, sort of actions. And so it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry I ruined your life in high school by making fun of you." I mean, like, this happens. People ruin each other's life in high school by, you know, having cliques and stuff like that. And it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry I did that when I was in high school." You can think of, like, Happy Gilmore or something. What's that movie? Happy Gilmore, maybe? Or not Happy Gilmore. One of the those movies where yeah, I think it's Happy Gilmore, where, like, he calls up you don't know the movie? You're probably younger than me, but it's an Adam Sandler classic where Adam Sandler was a rich kid and he treated everyone else like idiots because he could. He got away with it. His dad had a lot of money. And basically, he realizes he's been a crap person a little later in life. And he starts making himself better. And he starts calling people, and he calls up Steve Buscemi and apologizes to him for ruining his life in high school. And it all works out in the end because it's a fun comedy. But Steve Buscemi really appreciated it. But the fact that Happy Gilmore just called, it really made a difference to Steve Buscemi. He was like, oh yeah, I appreciate it. But it took a lot of work to do that. So I feel like there's more going on in a sincere apology than just the calling it a sincere apology too. I mean, yeah. If you want to see classic Adam Sandler, I recommend you watch it. But other than that, I mean, it's one of his best. I think people really like that movie anyway. Anyway, so we're talking about forgiveness though. Yeah, so it's so far as we're concerned, the moral breach has been repaired and our moral relations have now been restored. So they apologize to you and you forgive them. And that is all it is to. You doubt you're younger, maybe you're older, you're European and these Sandler movies seem less popular here. Oh, fair enough. Okay. Yeah, so if you care about Adam Sandler. So not age difference, location difference. Anywho's. This communicative act is clearly within our power, and so it will require a separate moral justification. For instance, it is deceptive or at least highly misleading to offer something that we do not have to give. So we need to have experienced forgiveness before we can offer it. But even then, the offer will not achieve its communicative intention unless it is done for the right reasons. Suppose that I have been persuaded that your apology is sincere. As a result, I have experienced the liberation of forgiveness, but I have not told you this. I know from my own life experience how painful it would be to offer an apology without receiving forgiveness in return. So, out of compassion, I decide to give you my assurance that I have forgiven you. Oh, that's true. If you've been an ass and you feel bad about it, you definitely want to hear that the person is not still in pain over it, and that they're through with it, and the forgiveness is sort of the closing comment. Yeah. But suppose instead I become overly distressed by your desperation to hear that I have forgiven you. In such a case, I may not be able to focus on what you are feeling. So I offer you forgiveness merely to relieve my own distress, rather than as a genuine attempt to reassure you. Any such offer is likely to come across as superficial, insincere, or even condescending. For example, I guess I should put you out of your misery and accept your apology. You will hear the lack of authenticity and remain unconvinced, if not wounded, by the exchange. Sure. But in some sense, so what? If I screwed you over and I need your apology, it's man, you're a needy, whiny person that you screwed up and then now I need to hear the that you feel okay. That seems like you're asking for a lot. So, anyway. Again, there may be prudential reasons to delay the offer of forgiveness even if we have already experienced it. An apology is only a promissory note, a down payment, as it were. So if we were to remain in contact with the person responsible, we are entitled to be on guard for as long as it takes them to demonstrate that they really have changed their attitude and behavior. Thus, it might be that the offer of forgiveness is judiciously parceled out over time in largely unspoken gestures of increasing trust rather than all at once. Fine. There is another important reason for not offering forgiveness prior to an apology, one that is more germane to the present discussion. Suppose that we have yet to hear a sincere apology from the person who has wronged us, and so we have not yet experienced forgiveness. Nevertheless, we go ahead and offer them forgiveness. What would this convey to the person responsible? It would surely communicate to them that we do not care about their ongoing contempt for us. It does not matter to us if they do not see us as their moral equal. And what would be the consequences of such a message? For one thing, it would open us up to being re-victimized. The person responsible would now have our permission to continue treating us as inferior or as a mere means to their ends. But there is also a crucial moral issue at stake. If we were to offer forgiveness in the absence of a sincere apology, this would reflect a disregard for our own inherent worth. It would demonstrate a lack of self-respect. Yes, but this is weird right here. It's like, okay, yeah, like I'm going to forgive you even though you're a completely terrible human. And it's like, well, why are you doing it? And it's like, well, maybe you have to do it. And yeah, would you be open to that sort of like them doing it? Well, you were already doing it and you're trying to move on. And if they do it again, you have to, then you're going to have to do the whole like, I'm like defensive stance again. But I mean, it feels like if I'm going to forgive you, it's like trying to take the moral high ground. It's like, look, you're still a crappy person, but like this seems like more like an offensive move to me than merely defensive. Because if I'm going to say, look, I'm going to forgive you even though you haven't like changed at all, it's like I'm going to, even in spite of your crappiness, try to take away one more thing that might be holding you up from becoming a better person, that like in some sense you have to even think about me anymore. And that would be a moral high ground sort of position, and saying I'm going to forgive you even though you don't deserve it, just in the hopes that this enables you to move on also. So, but yeah, I mean, this is really turning the other cheek. It's like, oh my God, I hate this person. They're terrible to me. I'm going to forgive them. And then like just act like nothing happened. And then like they're going to come back and be a jerk to you again. It's like, that sounds terrible. And I think the author is trying to say that, but it's a very weird thing to do. Okay, 2. Can't speak. A critique of unconditional forgiveness. 2.1. 3 grounds for unconditional forgiveness. Seems like, I mean, I don't know, is this like a religious sort of thinker? Like, why would you, like, who would be unconditionally forgiving except for like a religious, like, does Jesus unconditionally forgive? Does Yahweh unconditionally forgive? I think, I mean, I'm not a theologian. I don't know much about it. But like, I think in the Christian religion, you have to repent. And it's like, you can, like, once you repent, you get forgiveness. I could be wrong about this. Do not be quoting me on any Christian theology, but it's like once you repent, then you are forgiven. And so I hope I'm right. Thank you, View Prime, for agreeing, but or letting me know that you agree. But like there's something about this that feels very sort of like a Christian, sort of like I have to repent in some sense. Okay. We can now turn to Kleinig's defense of unconditional forgiveness. First, see, what's interesting here is that there's no reference, so it seems like people know who Kleinig is already. Maybe he was, or he or she, I don't know, or they. Now we can do Kleinig's defense. Maybe they were referenced above, but like I just don't. Oh, here's the he. First, he argues that it springs from or is an instance of several virtues, including generosity, charity, or love, gifting, and acts of personal grace. Yeah, see, this is what I'm thinking about. Personal grace. However, an otherwise virtuous act, such as generosity, is only morally laudable under certain conditions. If it is arbitrary or indiscriminate or not otherwise moderated by morally relevant constraints, then it will lose its laudability. Examples include money thrown haphazardly into a busy street or providing a benefit that it was not one's to provide. Hence, he offers 3 grounds that are each intended to provide sufficient moral justification for unconditional forgiveness and thereby ensure that it is not arbitrary or indiscriminate. Suffering. The first ground presented is a situation in which the person responsible has evidently suffered enough. Her wrongdoing did not work out to her advantage, quite the opposite. In such a scenario, it would, Kleinig argues, seem heartless and excessive to continue to feel resentment toward them. If the person harmed has a generous and beneficent spirit, then they will instead choose to abort their resentment. So this is just being like, because the other person's shitty, but has suffered so much for being shitty, that you're going to try to lessen their burden. This is, I think, what I was saying earlier. It's like they've been suffering so bad that you decide, you know what? They don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm just going to forgive them and hopefully they'll move on. All right, to assess this ground, we need to be clear about why the wrongdoer is suffering. There are 2 options. First, it might be that their wrongdoing has damaged their overall well-being. For instance, they might have become homeless or destitute, or they may have been given an especially cruel or disproportionate sentence, such as life imprisonment, years in solitary isolation, or the death penalty. There will be many victims for whom such an outcome would not be unwelcome, but it is hard to see how this could be a laudable response. What then is the alternative? Kleinig's suggestion is that we draw upon our reserve of generosity and beneficence, forswear our resentment, and offer forgiveness to the one who has wronged us. But we need to remember that, in such a situation, the person responsible has not accepted that they have done anything wrong, let alone shown any remorse or made an apology. Hence, so far as they are concerned, they do not need our forgiveness. They might even find our gesture presumptuous, self-righteous, manipulative, or even condescending. Hey, Evolve Yourself, how you doing? I'm doing okay. It's been weird times in New York last few days, but I'm alright. Well, just busy and stressed out and things are fucked, but that's okay. Reading this paper on moral grounds for forgiveness, it's seemingly very it feels like a very Christian flavor to me. I don't know enough Christian theology, but this is like if you're in the position of turning the other cheek, just always turning the other cheek, what's the right sort of way of always turning the other cheek? That's kind of what I feel like is going on here, and I'm just like, I'm not this sort of person, but it's an interesting analysis. Your friend who just lost a cousin, yeah, that's really hard. Losing people is extremely difficult. Yeah. So the question is, when do you forgive people, and how do you properly forgive people when they have been crappy to you? So, yeah. So if you, and right here is if they if you offer someone saying I forgive you, but they didn't actually think they did anything wrong, then they might even find your gesture presumptuous, self-righteous, manipulative, or even condescending. But then it follows from that, from their perspective, their suffering is not due to our lack of forgiveness, nor will it be alleviated by it. Moreover, given the nature of their suffering, they would be right. Our forgiveness will not give them a home or alter their sentence. Offering them forgiveness in this situation would be like giving a glass of water to someone who just needs some money to pay their bills. The offer may spring from a generous spirit, but it would be indiscriminate and so lacking in laudability. Suppose then that the suffering in question is related to how the person responsible feels about their wrongdoing. They may be consumed by piercing shame, self-recrimination, and a guilty conscience. The offer of forgiveness could potentially alleviate this kind of suffering. Yet a wrongdoer could not be suffering in this way unless they had accepted that they did something wrong and were remorseful for having done so. Indeed, their suffering just is the pain of remorse. But then, if forgiveness is offered to alleviate this kind of suffering, it shares the same moral ground as conditional forgiveness. It is offered on account of the demonstrative presence of remorse. Moreover, one could argue that if a wrongdoer feels no remorse for what they have done, then they are evidently not, in the morally relevant respect, suffering enough. To offer forgiveness to a wrongdoer in such a condition could well prevent them from going through the painful but necessary process of moral self-examination and empathetic reflection on the harm they have caused. They will have been preemptively let off the moral hook, and it is hard to see how that could be to their benefit. Hence, if the person harmed has a beneficent spirit, then in such a circumstance they would not offer forgiveness. You see, and this is what I find weird. Right here. This is let the motherfucker suffer. They deserve to suffer and they have to suffer. This is the old purgatory. This is purgatory right here. They're saying the person has to go through purgatory to be cleansed by fire, and then they will be allowed into the kingdom of heaven afterwards. It's is this really a good idea? The idea that you're going to maybe get them out. Do they have to suffer so badly and there is no other way of moral progress except through suffering, that they have to necessarily suffer to become a better person? I find that weird, because this makes you the judge of what their suffering should be. How do you do that? And so I find this a very strange account. This is what I feel it's a very religious account, but I feel this is a purgatory account. They have to suffer. And that's the problem with this stuff up here. It's if you offer someone who is unremorseful and forgiveness, they might, I would think that they would think you were being, as they said here, condescending. Thank you, Evolve Yourself. But I would assume, like, if someone who felt no remorse, that they're condescending. But on the other hand, in the future, if they ever did feel remorse, then they could look back and say, hey, the person had moved on. I don't need to dwell on this. I can just work on myself getting better and not worry about having to go back and make amends in some sense. So it's like I can just put that behind me. So in some sense, like, yes, they're not going to be happy at the time, but forgiving someone who does not feel remorse might be a investment in the future, is what I'm saying. So, okay. So that was the suffering position. And this author, I think, likes suffering a little too much. Going for a Christian sainthood here. All right, moral solidarity. Suppose I put myself in the shoes of the person who has wronged me. I soon begin to realize that if I had been in their circumstances, with their upbringing, education, financial resources, life opportunities, and so on, I might well have become the kind of person who have committed the same wrong that they have done to me. But in that case, it is largely a matter of moral luck that I am not in their current situation. Kleinig takes it that such considerations can provide adequate moral justification for offering forgiveness to a wrongdoer, even if they show no remorse. In light of our moral solidarity with those who have wronged us, continuing to resent them, as Kleinig puts it, likely to evidence a superiority and condescension to which we have no moral right. All right, that's fair. Like, they came from a shitty place, and to hold like it over them might be bad. I mean, you're taking away their agency at the time, but like, okay, maybe. All right. Author says, however, there are additional insights afforded by a sense of moral solidarity. Suppose I put myself in the shoes of the person responsible for causing me harm. If I were them, I would want the opportunity to initiate the work of moral repair as a matter of my own dignity and self-respect. I would not want to be preempted by an offer of forgiveness before I had undertaken the necessary moral changes within myself. I would want the time and the opportunity to experience genuine remorse. I would also want the person I hurt to be open to hearing my remorse is genuine rather than slam the door in my face. But then what I am hoping for here is not forgiveness, but rather a willingness to forgive. Again, this author likes suffering. They want them to suffer as much as possible to get the full-on moral increase from the lowest spot to the highest spot. It's like there's a little bit I mean, they're kind of badass. I'll give them that. Like, this is kind of a hardcore position. But, like, they don't want to be preempted by an offer of forgiveness before you had taken it. This is giving someone, an asshole, way too much credit. This person is giving the assholes way too much credit. You think they're like, oh, I should have worked on myself and screw you for forgiving me? That's exceedingly excessive, in my opinion, because, look, if someone wants to, like, say I screwed someone over and they're saying, hey, look, in moral solidarity, I'm going to forgive you now because, you know, I could have been you. I could easily have been you. And I understand what you went through. So you don't have to worry about me anymore. You just worry about you. It's like, thank you. Let me, like, I do have to work on myself. I don't need the burden of you also. Like, I can worry about the burden of you if I want to do the full-on moral suffering that, like, this author wants. I don't have to listen to your forgiveness. Like, I can understand that it will be there, the willingness to forgive. But that doesn't mean, like, the fact that you said it just means I can take it that way. But, like, if you don't give them your forgiveness, then they have to worry about, like, not getting it. And do I actually need that to, like, do the full moral rehabilitation of my soul as someone who has harmed someone else? I don't know if that's a necessary thing. But again, this feels like the author likes full-on suffering. This person's a masochist. I hope not. I don't know. Maybe it's fun to be a masochist. I wouldn't know much about it. I would also hope that the person I had harmed would eventually forgive me, but not merely out of moral solidarity. Otherwise, it would feel as if they were making an excuse for my behavior rather than taking my choices seriously. Yeah, I mean, you are taking away their agency. By grounding their forgiveness in matters that I could have done nothing about or that are common to everyone, they would not be respecting my moral agency. I would want them to offer forgiveness because of my decision to take responsibility for my actions. I would want them to recognize the sincerity of my remorse, and for that to be the reason why they are able to let go of their resentment and offer their forgiveness. In sum, the insights of moral solidarity might encourage a person harmed to be more willing to forgive, but they are also likely to convince them not to offer unconditional forgiveness. Fair, like if you're going with the full unconditional forgiveness. But like, again, it's like just holding suffering for both people as long as possible, like savoring the suffering. I was just talking about Hellraiser. It's like, this guy's like Pinhead here. It's like, exquisite suffering. Hellraiser. Yeah. Yeah, and involve yourself. I won a eBay auction, which is hilarious to me that I haven't done a full-on eBay auction for a drawing pad, like a electronic drawing pad. So I'm gonna be able to draw better than like this in the future. Yeah. Relationships. The third ground offered for unconditional forgiveness consists of the particularistic ties that we have with others. To use the example that Kleine gives, suppose that a young man has raped and murdered his girlfriend. Wow. All right, that's terrible. In doing so, he has not only wronged his girlfriend, but also his parents. Their hopes for him have been betrayed, and this has brought about a familial rupture. Yeah, he's ruined his life and his girlfriend and her family's life and all those things. We can imagine how, for some parents, their intense shame might drive them to disown or denigrate their son, perhaps even wishing he had never been born. But a more laudable option, it is argued, would be to remind themselves that he will always be their son. So in view of these particularistic ties, they reach out in love, visit him in prison, do what they can to be responsive to his concerns, with the intention of providing a moral path to suturing the familial rupture his acts have brought about. For this to work as an illustration of unconditional forgiveness, we need to assume that the son has not acknowledged the harm that he has caused his parents or shown any remorse over how he has betrayed their hopes. So far as he is concerned, he is not responsible for the pain they are feeling, or he simply doesn't care. But in that case, the son has shown utter disrespect for his parents. If they were to offer him forgiveness under these circumstances, then they would fall short of being laudable for the same reasons given above. The parents would not be taking their son's disrespect for them with moral seriousness that it deserves. Moreover, the withholding of forgiveness could be rightly motivated by their parental love and concern for his moral character and the long-term well-being. Indeed, the love and compassion shown by the parents may, in the end, enable their son to face his shame, acknowledge the harm he has caused them, and thus convey to them his sincere remorse. In other words, their particularistic ties would, in this scenario, lead the parents to refrain from offering unconditional forgiveness. In this one case, like, I'm kind of with the author. I don't know how you recover from being that terrible. Like, if someone is like holds me in contempt, yeah, like, you can move on from that. This is like rape, murder, like, it's just like, I don't know what there is. Now, could there be, they were saying, like you'll always be your kid of your parents, and should your parents forgive you at that point? If you show no remorse? I mean, I think I'm with the author on this one. It's like, it's like you had your chance, you tossed it away. You're just a crap person. Okay, an alternative to forgiveness. I have argued that the only way we can cease to feel resentment is if we are persuaded that the threat posed by the person responsible has been removed. I have also suggested that only a sincere apology can provide us with sufficient reason to be persuaded of this. However, could there be other considerations that might persuade me that the threat is not as potent as I had thought? If there were, then by focusing on these considerations, I could presumably minimize or diminish the intensity of my resentment, even as the threat remains in place. In other words, if there were such considerations, this could be a way of making sure that my feelings of resentment no longer dominate my emotional life or darken my entire outlook. When an apology is not forthcoming and so forgiveness is not an option, this could be a viable alternative. But what kind of considerations would achieve this end, and how could they be compatible with my self-respect? For instance, one way I could downgrade the potency of the threat would be to accept that I deserve to be treated with contempt. Another option would be to deny the humanity or moral standing of the person responsible. But as we've seen, neither of these are laudable options. So are there other considerations that would work? Again, this is going back to what I said at the beginning. I don't know if everyone was here at the time, but the idea that you're going to just like roll over and turn the other cheek, this person seems to like suffering here. They want to suffer. It's like, well, what can I do if I don't denigrate the other person? Because in some sense, you could say, well, I just completely accept that I suck and that this person is right for holding me in contempt. I mean, maybe that's the case, but like, why would you do that to yourself? That seems terrible. And then the other option is to go on attack. And this person cannot go on attack for some reason because they have this very weird sense that another person can be shitty, but like you can't go on attack and deny the humanity of their moral standing of the person responsible. And they think this option is not good, to deny the humanity of the person responsible. You don't have to deny them all humanity, but you can knock them down a few pegs. They're treating this like it's like an on or an off switch, that you just treat everyone exactly the same with full on moral standing or none or something like that. And that seems very strange, that you have to, Manichaeanism, where you've just got completely one way or completely the other way. That makes little sense. I hold different people in different levels of respect, and if someone's treating me with contempt, they get knocked down a few pegs. I don't call for their death just because they're an asshole. I just don't want to deal with them anymore, and I avoid those people, or I might do something to separate myself from them. Yeah, the moral status is not a binary thing, as Viewbot Prime says. It's so like the idea that you can only turn the other cheek is really like a weird view of binary view of morality. Okay, so let's see. And so they continue with Kleinig's analysis. As it happens, the three considerations put forward in Kleinig's paper can serve precisely this purpose. For instance, if we focus our attention on the non-remorse related suffering of the person responsible and put ourselves in their shoes, we will tend to experience compassion. That's fair. You can experience compassion for someone if they are suffering. And it is virtually impossible to experience full-scale resentment against someone whilst we are, at the same time, feeling empathetic concern for their well-being. This is not yet forgiveness. Their threat remains in place. Nevertheless, in experiencing compassion for the person responsible, we are not thereby accepting their message of contempt or denying their moral equality, quite the opposite. A similar story can be told for the other two considerations that Kleinig provides. So the threat, this is not yet, no, you're not forgiving them, but why is this protecting you? Like, just because, but what's this doing for you? Feeling compassion for the other person, what does that do? This is not forgiveness, but what good is it doing for you that to feel compassion for the other person that's a crappy person? There's lots of people to feel compassion for. What do we do? What's that getting us here? I don't know. Why would this strategy have been thought of or described as forgiveness? One explanation could be that the emotional effect is so similar. As we focus on the relevant considerations, the intensity of the resentment we were feeling towards the person responsible will, like the experience of forgiveness, tend to decrease significantly. But there is a difference. Reflecting on these considerations cannot remove the threat entirely. Only a sincere apology can produce that outcome. Hence, there will be moments when we lose our focus, or when, for whatever reason, we are not feeling quite so generous or compassionate or charitable. Then, when something reminds us of the threat, our feelings of resentment will flare up again to protect us. So this strategy is clearly second best in comparison to forgiveness. But it can nevertheless provide us with significant emotional relief. It is largely within our control, and it is a laudable response that upholds our self-respect. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things, like, yeah, you could do that. You could also go get yourself some ice cream, and that'll make you feel better too. But then, like, they could attack you while you're eating your ice cream. It's like, well, why? Who cares? Like, I'm sorry. Like, if you want to go feel compassion, there's plenty of better people to feel compassion about. And if you want to focus your compassion on someone that wronged you, maybe to understand something more about them, to like, that way you could like maybe go back to the feeling like moral solidarity with them. That's interesting too, but like this just seems like a non-starter really. Evolve Yourself says, personally, I believe it is helpful to feel compassion for those who have caused harm. By doing so, it helps break the emotional chains between the victim and the asshole. And why not feel compassion for everyone then? I mean, yeah. Well, I agree with that. Like, if it is helping you to somehow understand your situation, like they said with moral solidarity that was mentioned above, like to say, hey, look, this person came from this place and I understand them better, and that means like in some sense, yes, they're still being a dickhead, but like I kind of understand where it's coming from. What you're doing there is, as the author said too, you are removing the moral agency from them, and so that will make it feel less personal, I guess you could say. It was just like circumstances screwed them up so bad, and then that got transferred to me, and I'm not going to let that affect me because I understand that about agency. But yeah, now the question is, but if just compassion makes you feel good, why not feel compassion for everyone then, as Evolve Yourself says? And yeah, go be Buddhist. That sounds great. Like, and that will make you feel better too. Or I think it might, but I hoped it would. But like, yeah, like there are definitely people out there that says compassion for everyone is the way to go. So, I mean, yeah, and that might work too, but like, I'd like to achieve nirvana one day. Yeah. Achieving nirvana on Twitch. That'd be good. Yeah. I wonder if how many usernames involve Nirvana here on Twitch. It might be a fun thing to go get like a cool Nirvana-based username. And something like completely inappropriate associated with it. Like poop Nirvana. Declarations of unconditional forgiveness. I have argued that the strategy Kleining is defending is a morally warranted and laudable response to unrepentant wrongdoers, so long as we refrain from conceiving of it or describing it as forgiveness. But how might this relate to the Roof case, which is the central example of unconditional forgiveness employed in Kleinig's paper? Is it possible to explain the offering of forgiveness that was made to Roof in a way that is compatible with the foregoing account? This must be the Dylan Roof. Yeah, I think that's right. Dylan Roof shot up a church for no good reason, and I don't think he felt bad about it at all. You can look it up. This is just a few years ago. It was in the news. It was all over the place. There's not a whole lot more to be said. He's just a terrible person. Okay. Rather than speculate about the actual motives or communicative intentions of those involved, what follows is a purely hypothetical and thus may or may not reflect what happened in this particular situation. Yeah, I think some of the church members that he shot forgave him, or said they were going to forgive him. Okay, so here's this hypothetical situation. A public offer of forgiveness not only communicates something to the wrongdoer, it is also implicitly aimed at those who might overhear the offer. Those who presented the offer of forgiveness to Roof were members of a Christian-oriented racial minority that has suffered a long history of violence, discrimination, hatred, and persecution. They may have had good reason to believe that some members of their community would be inclined to react with violence in response to this especially cruel atrocity. Thus, we might assume that the offer was not dissimilar to Rodney King's plea, "Can we all just get along?" I'm getting more and more disgusted with this author as we're going. Really, can we all just get along? That's what that came down to. But the language of forgiveness suggests more than an appeal for calm. In this context, it could only have made sense from within a theological framework. For members of their community, the word forgiveness would have evoked a range of associated feelings and thoughts. These would have included compassion, grace, humility, courage, charity, and a sense of moral solidarity, and above all, the injunction to love your enemies. Well, that's fair. I would be unsurprised if the Christian faith played a role in their offering forgiveness to Dylan Roof. This is not to suggest that the church members who made this offer were only doing so with this public appeal in mind. They were not speaking at a protest march. The offer was deeply personal and directed towards Roof himself in the courtroom. It represented their own authentic journey and their decision to take a different moral path. Yeah, I mean, the idea that I'm going to put myself in a position of someone who actively tried to kill me. Saito Architect. Forgiveness is a red herring for people who haven't yet figured out how to get over it. It might be part of getting over it. And I think that's one of the points of this article is that some people need to forgive to get over stuff. So is it a red herring? Maybe, sometimes. Not always, I'd suspect. Some people need it. They need to be able to put the person who has wronged them out in some sense, and they do that by forgiving them. To just say, I'm going to no longer even worry about this. And that might be a necessary step for certain things. But like, yeah. And welcome in, Saito Architect. But yeah, like, I'm just a little bit worried about this paper. Is that we're making up situations for people who've been in of course I don't know the author. I have never been shot at. I have not been in this sort of situation. Thus, I find it extremely hard to put myself in the situation that they are in. Now, could they, out of a position of worrying about what might happen in the community, said they were going to offer the forgiveness to Dylan Roof because they were out of a feeling of compassion for the greater community? Yeah, sure. It's possible. But it also seems like that could be the case, but it could just be anything else too. So, in sum, their offer of unconditional forgiveness need not be understood as making the claim that the moral breach with Roof had somehow been repaired, that his failure to acknowledge their humanity did not matter, or that his moral slate had been wiped clean. It could instead have been intended as a way of communicating to Roof that they were going to stand up against his message of contempt, not with the hatred or violence, but with the countervailing force of love and compassion. And because it was made in a public space, it could have been intended as a plea for members of their community to respond in a similar way. So yeah, this is not what the author was calling as forgiveness. This is more going on the offense to show that their higher moral standing can withstand someone attacking them. So this is basically, it's not turning the other cheek. It's saying you're not even hitting us. You don't hit us because you were too weak to hit us. So this is not, in some sense, forgiving and just saying there's any sort of like overcoming the breach. It's saying you're too puny in some sense. Like, this is saying God will bring us through. You are too puny to harm God. I mean, that would be more of along what this is saying. So it's not what the author is saying. But yeah. On this author says, on this hypothetical reading, it would be hard not to see the public offer of unconditional forgiveness as an exceptionally laudable response. Nevertheless, there is a significant risk attached to the use of such language. Yeah, it'd be, Vbot says they were denying they were harmed in the first place. Yeah, if you interpret it this way, then they were overcoming. They were not really giving forgiveness in the sense that this author has been saying, where you have some sort of communicative transference, and that is what gives you the release of the contempt. That's saying your contempt is not great enough to harm us. All right. Nevertheless, there is significant risk attached to the use of such language. Many will not hear the intended connotations, and so will take it literally. This danger is made particularly evident in Roxane Gay's New York Times article. She took the church's members' response at face value. They really were offering forgiveness to a white supremacist who murdered 9 African Americans and then subsequently showed no sign of remorse. Understandably, she saw this to be yet another instance in which African Americans felt they had little option but to submit quietly to the unrepentant cruelty and disdain of the white majority. Black people, and the author quotes, "Black people forgive because we need to survive. We have to forgive time and time again while racism or white silence in the face of racism continues to thrive. We have had to forgive slavery, segregation, Jim Crow laws, lynching, inequity in every realm, mass incarceration, voter disenfranchisement, inadequate representation in popular culture, microaggressions, and more. We forgive and forgive and forgive, and those who trespass against us continue to trespass against us. White people want to believe it is possible to heal from such profound and malingering trauma because to face the openness of the wounds racism has created in our society is too much. I, for one, am done forgiving. Yeah, so this is, again, saying we do not forgive. We need to go on the offensive. And this is the one thing this author seemed to think was bad at the outset, that you do not give your oppressor the same moral standing. It's like you don't just forgive them, you do something against them, and that is to knock them down a few pegs. You don't have to take away their humanity, but you do need to knock them down a few pegs. And I think that, you know, these are two different opinions, of course. You just say you forgive them, but the thing is, did the people in the church really do what this author said, to just like unconditionally forgive, in the sense that they just said it doesn't matter to us? Or were they like showing their moral superiority in some sense in a public act to do other things? Well, maybe in doing it so publicly, like you don't have to announce it. If you didn't announce it, that would be different. Like if they told Dylan Roof in private that they were forgiving him, then it wouldn't be public. But they were trying to show that, you know, maybe you are showing that you are more morally superior. Now, that's terrible, as this person says. Why do you have to show moral superiority when you have all these not moral things, like very tangible things that have been done to you? No one wants to deal with tangible. You want like substantive change to happen. You want the lives of your people and like your community to get better. You don't want to just have to have moral superiority. That's thin quite often when people are dying. So yeah, I mean, this is again, like, I think I'm not loving this author's like really hardcore stance on forgiveness. It's just a little too much for me here. All right, this is it. Conclusion. There are ways in which those who have been wronged can diminish their resentment toward the person responsible, even though they have yet to hear a sincere apology. For such a response to be laudable, however, it must, as Kleinig suggests, be motivated by virtues such as compassion, generosity, love, and humility, and morally grounded in considerations such as compassion for the wrongdoer suffering, a sense of moral solidarity, or relational ties with them. However, if we conceive of or describe this kind of response as forgiveness, then not only will it lose its laudability and moral justification, but there will also be a significant risk of misunderstanding its otherwise valuable role, with potentially dangerous or hurtful consequences. Yeah. You know, sometimes I feel bad about like coming down on authors. I don't feel that bad about coming down. This person likes suffering way too much. Like, really. This person has this very puritanical view of like forgiveness, like almost with like religious purity, that what is perfect forgiveness. And I don't think this person's living in the real world where you're doing it like where perfect forgiveness actually has a place. The chance of like perfect forgiveness is going to be rare, and it's not. The world is way more messy than this, and the idea that we can get like the perfect, like the other person has perfectly suffered enough and is in position to like, you know, has the sufficient remorse and worked so hard to make themselves better, and then offers an apology, and then this is the perfect time for an apology, and then you give forgiveness at that time and everybody is happy and it's like perfect. True, but it is possible to evolve yourself. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't hate that this is like getting published. I just think it's I think it's a very extreme position, and the fact that it can exist, what this person's saying, is fine. The idea that like this is a realistic version of the world, I find very strange. And I mean, you can see right here, this person has a full book on stuff. So this isn't like some kid. Like this is like full on professional or something, I guess. So it's just, I find this very strange because of how narrow it is. And, you know, this makes some sense in a religious context. As far as I know, this is not a religious publication. This is International Journal of Applied Philosophy. But still, that's fine. but I just find it a little bit of a narrow understanding of why people are doing things. Like what is what is perfect forgiveness outside of yeah, I'm not sure what exactly this perfect forgiveness is, and I will grant that this author has given some like necessary conditions, maybe not sufficient, but like some good conditions of unconditional forgiveness. Um so yeah. But yeah, this is just really too much metaphysics for me. Like why would anyone accept this level of suffering is necessary for remorse? Like I find this, you have to have suffering of the significant amount, and if the person hasn't suffered enough, then they have not had the appropriate amount of remorse. And this is the sort of thing, how do you measure the appropriate amount of remorse? How do you know how sincere an apology is? You take what you see, and the author said like it can be conditional and like in parts, like they screwed up and like it takes time to repair the relationship, fine. And then like you can apologize, sort of, you can forgive them over time. That's something that makes some sense here. But that's really, again, like the idea that like that you can somehow measure this, or you understand this stuff in a global sense, that they kind of, and you can be unconditionally forgiving them, it's just a little much for me. Yeah, have fun trying to quantify the amount of remorse one has experienced. Yeah, I mean, someone could offer you a sincere apology and you'd be like, it's not sincere enough. I mean, that could happen. Why not? It's just like, sure. All right. Now that I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say about this. It's just like, it is just this has annoyed me in ways that other philosophy doesn't, because I feel like, yes, the author has a point. The unconditional forgiveness, but it just seems so very narrow and like a unrealistic version of how troubling it can be to hold on to like a grudge. And frankly, I'll just hold on to a grudge at this point. Like, it goes back to the moral indignancy and feeling righteous. Maybe that's worth more to you. Like, if someone has screwed you, you can forgive them, but you should still feel, you can still use your indignancy to feel good about yourself. Like, that person screwed me and I'm better than that. And like whenever you think about it, you can be like, they sucked. They may get better, but I'm still better than they were at that time. Okie dokie. So that's it for this paper, unless y'all have something to say.